Kendric Rhymes leaving Southern for Tennessee State wasn't a move that I predicted at the beginning of the offseason, but I do think it's a move that provides Rhymes with a higher statistical ceiling. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, aka the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current site expert at Who Dat Dish and contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. For all of my everydayers, thank you again for making this your first listen of the day every day. But remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And if you are new to FanDuel, put down a $5 bet. If that wins and it is your first time, you get $200 in bonus bets back. Go to FanDuel to make every moment more. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Jackson State's championship, back-to-back championships in softball. In segment 2, we're going to take a look at Santonio Holmes, who joined the Central State coaching staff as a wide receiver. I think that this is a great move, a move that more players should emulate, and he's already shown a tad bit of proficiency in this role. However, I want to kick this whole episode off with a move that I did not expect. It was not something that I was predicting, but it is former Southern running back Kendric Rimes transferring over to Tennessee State. This is a move, like I said, I did not see coming, but I think it makes a lot of sense for Rimes if he wanted a new destination and he wanted a higher statistical ceiling. The reason, and honestly, you could actually argue that this gives him a higher ceiling, period, on a team standpoint as well, depending on what you look at as the peak of collegiate football, specifically HBCU football. Maybe we should talk about that at the end. But I think that in general, Rimes is a pretty good grab for Tennessee State. I like some of the things that I saw from the Southern running back in 2024. I like some of the things that I saw from him in 2023. I would make an argument that 2023 was my favorite season for him, stat-wise. Allow me to get on a little bit of my high horse for a minute and say that we need to do better as far as putting out information, because I read articles, they have different stats for Rimes. I go to the Southern athletic website, they have different stats for Rimes if you go to his individual profile versus if you go to the 2024 cumulative stats. They're different numbers. On the cumulative stats, they have him at 645 yards. Then on his actual page, if you go to his career section, they'll have him, I think it's 702. But then they have him playing 18 games. He can't even play 18 games. So his averages are all wonky, and you got to go and you got to manually change them. So this is what I mean. It's just, to me, we got to do a little bit better with that. I'm just going to put that out there, and for whoever hears it, right? Southern, we got to fix that, because there's no reason he should have 18 games played on his season. And there's no reason that those averages should reflect as if he did play 18 games. And there's no reason that the stat page should have a different number than his own personal page. These things I feel like are easy to get constant across the board, and we shouldn't accept any less than that. Now that I've gotten off my high horse, let me talk about his 2023 season, because what I was referencing was 2024. I like his 2023 season because he had 5.5 yards per carry. That's number one. So that's a really good yard per clip. And if we're talking about sharing a backfield, if we're talking about how much of the load are you able to carry, I want to see what you do when you do touch the ball. And we'll talk about that as we continue. But in talking about the rushing game or the running game, I wanted to see, all right, so you got about 120 carries or something like that. What are you able to do with it? You get 5.5 yards per carry. You end up getting to 600. I think it was actually 110. But you end up getting, it was 110 carries. You have 660 yards, and you have 5.5 a pop. I'm loving that. I'm loving that. 2023 gave me his highest yards per game, his highest yards per carry. It didn't give me his highest raw numbers, but that's because he played more games in 2024 than he did in 2023. And it also, most importantly, gave me his most touchdowns in a single season at 9. So with 9 touchdowns per game, well, not 9 touchdowns per game. Good God, he'd be Walter Payton if he had 9 touchdowns per game. But in 9 touchdowns in a season, I'm thinking in 2025, when you move into being a top dog, when you move into being the lead role, maybe you can be a double digit 10, 11 rushing touchdown type of guy. In 2024, the things that I think he did improve on was his ability to catch the ball. He had less catches and he had less yards per game, but per catch, he had a greater yards per catch. That was an improvement. And I think when you're moving around and you're talking about transferring, I know it seems like it's a lot of nitpicking of stats here. Okay. In 2023, he did this. In 2024, he did that. And then let me see if I can take what he did in 2022. I'm not trying to put a bunch of pieces that don't go together. See, I'm looking at yards per carry, which, depending on how you look at 2024, it's kind of hard because if you look at one side, he has 5 yards per carry. If you look at the other one, he has like 4.4, and that's a drastic difference. If you're looking at 5 yards per carry, it's just a minor difference. For me, I look at some things that changed, and I would like for him to return to 2023. This is what I'm doing. I'm trying to detail the best season for him in 2025. And that's taking some of the best parts of his junior season and then his senior year, because I think he's a grad transfer right now. And in his 2023 campaign, I'm looking for the guy who had 5.5 yards per pop. Now, we see multiple players who get more carries and their yards per carry drop. That's natural. But we want to see how far is it going to drop. If you got 110 carries and you have 5.5, can I get you 160, 170, and you give me 5? If we can do that, we're talking real good. If we're talking about more carries, I'm assuming it comes with more touchdowns, because even in 2024, I'm talking about the dip a little bit. He scored 8 touchdowns that season. So you're seeing a player who is a consistent touchdown machine. If he can continue that under Reggie Barlow in 2025, then you're going to be very happy with this transfer. So it's just certain things I'm looking for, certain things that I'm looking for out of Kendric Rhymes. The reason that this was surprising to me is because Kobe Dillon transferred in the winter. He's been in the portal. I was surprised that he made this move. Kendric Rhymes, I was surprised that he made this move because everything was clearing the way for him to be the lead dog at Southern. This higher statistical category that I'm talking about, it comes with more carries, more yards, more touchdowns, more receptions, possibly. All of these things I'm talking about, they existed at Southern. And they existed in a system that he was already familiar with. So it's just kind of interesting to me that he chose to leave that familiarity. It's interesting to me that he chose to go to Tennessee State, because a lot of times you'll see guys who transfer out of an HBCU and they'll go to another FCS school, but it's not an HBCU. So sometimes it makes me feel like they want that playoff. They want that little argument, right? And this is what I mean when I say which side gives him a higher team ceiling. For many people in the HBCU world, they view the Celebration Bowl as the peak of HBCU football. And it is the Celebration. The Celebration Bowl is the Super Bowl for HBCUs, but there's also a decent sized contingent of people who feel like the FCS playoffs is the real top level of football, and we should be aiming for that. I think that there's arguments to be had. You can talk about the financial. That's where I stopped having the conversation. Once I realized financially it doesn't make sense, I put my competitiveness to the side. Competitively, I will always prefer the FCS playoffs. But from a financial standpoint and making money, and we know how important finances are to the HBCUs because it's hard enough getting funding. You don't want to spend it frivolously. You don't want to miss out on money, or just, you don't want to do that. So from a financial standpoint, that's when I shut up and I stopped talking. I know you right, Darrion, shut up, stop talking. Never that. But that's when I really do begin to stop talking about this, because to me, finances are pretty cut and dry. They're pretty black and white. What makes the most financial sense is what they're going to do. There's no point in letting my competitiveness get into that. Granted, Rhymes may see Tennessee State as a higher ceiling. He may feel like they're he may feel like Tennessee State has a better chance of making the playoffs than Southern has at repeating as SWAC West champions. That's another thing you could be looking at. So it's interesting when I look at Southern, the other side of this coin, they're very similar to Tennessee State in the sense of they both lost all their running backs. For Southern, Kobe Dillon been transferred. Then you look at Kendric Rhymes, who we're talking about today, who he transferred or entered the portal in March, transferred now beginning of May. Dillon's still in the portal. I mean, I guess he could come back, but he's been in the portal for a minute. Both of these men are taking their sweet time. Dillon more than Rhymes, but they're both taking their sweet time. And then CJ Russell, he was out of eligibility. He transferred over from Grambling 2 years ago with 2 years of eligibility. It's over now. So now you're going to have to really restart your running game. Meanwhile, Tennessee State was in a very similar position where they lost Jaden McGill. They lost they lost Jordan Gant, who I really felt like had a disappointing sophomore year. I thought he was in line for so much more, but now he's at Akron, so I'll be interested to see what he's able to do there. But in general, you lost your biggest running backs. So did Southern, except you stole one of Southern's. You're one of the reasons Southern has less running backs. So all of this is interesting to me. I think that Kendric Rhymes he was a part of a group of solid runners. I'll be interested if he can be a real top dog in a strong rushing attack, because Tennessee State didn't have that last year. They didn't have a strong rushing attack, in my opinion. But can Kendric Rhymes lead you to that? I thought he was solid. I thought Dillon was solid. I thought Russell was solid. And I thought that, I don't want to say serviceable because they're above that, and serviceable sounds like kind of dismissive. But I thought that they were solid players. Can Rhymes be above solid? Can he be a really good running back? And I think we'll see that in 2025. So I say that he's in a system he was familiar with, or he was in a system he's familiar with. Maybe he needs to be in a new system that actually maximizes him in a different way. But we'll see what happens in 2025 as we push forward. Another new thing that's happening in next season is Santonio Holmes will be joining Central State. It's a move that I think a lot more former players should try to emulate if they are interested in being coaches. We'll talk about that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official betting partner of the NBA. And let me tell you real quick, maybe you missed your opportunity to make some money on the lottery. Maybe you did put a $5 bet on Dallas winning the lottery. If you did that, you get $200 back in bonus bets. But if you didn't take that opportunity and you're still new to FanDuel, trying to wonder what your first bet's going to be, I get it. Go ahead and go to FanDuel and put some money down on these NBA playoffs. You have the Indiana Pacers, who have moved into being favorites against the Cleveland Cavaliers, looking to close it out with a gentleman's sweep. They're 7.5-point favorites. You put down $5 there, you get $200 back in bonus bets. It's simple. Every time you look at it, I'm new to FanDuel, $5 bet, it wins, $200 in bonus bets. Then I can get a little bit risky. I think it's a smart path. I'm just telling you what I would do. Matter of fact, let me tell you again. I go to FanDuel.com. Put down a $5 bet, get $200 back in bonus bets, and make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, thank you for all of my everydayers making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On NBA, because you have NBA action. We're in the conference semifinals. We're only a step away in some of these series from seeing who's going to be in the conference finals. So I want to talk about Santonio Holmes, who is joining Central State as a wide receiver coach. And I'm all for bringing in pro athletes to be positional coaches. I'm all for that, because I actually think that it's the smartest thing for them to do if they're interested in coaching. And it's very unproblematic. Nobody's complaining. Nobody is complaining about the former cornerback who wants to be a DB coach. No one's complaining about the former linebacker who wants to be a linebackers coach. No one's doing that. I think that, and I actually think it's the smartest thing for them too. I think sometimes some of us, I'm not one of them. Why'd I say some of us? I think a lot of times some people, some of them, I think they get a little, what they say when you're hungry, your eyes are bigger than your appetite, your eyes bigger than your stomach. I think that's what they say. And sometimes I feel like that applies to coaching. Not everybody is meant to be a head coach right away. That is a huge step to go from having no coaching experience or very, very, very little coaching experience to being a head coach. And the whole conversation is celebrity coaches. They're not prepared. Why don't we give some of our qualified people jobs? And I hate to rehash that conversation today, but in a way, I think what Santonio Holmes is doing, being the wide receiver coach at Central State, this is the path that more people should emulate. It gives you a chance to really put your toe into coaching, understand what it's about, understand what that culture is like, understand what that process is like, see somebody else do it firsthand and not being coached. I think studying coaching, there's three ways to learn how to be a head coach. Be a head coach is number one. Like being in the fire will give you everything you need. So being a head coach, studying head coaches, and then also being coached. But I think being coached is way lower than studying, because a lot of times you're not studying that coach to try to figure out how to motivate players the best way. You're not studying these coaches to see what drills are going to translate to production on the field. You're looking at these coaches to give you direction. You're looking at what helped you the most. And yeah, maybe you retain some of that and you try to implement it in your own coaching ability. But even then, that is a very narrow focus. And I'll tell you what the narrow focus kind of lends itself to: being a positional coach. Being narrow focused lends itself to being a positional coach. And that's not an insult, even though narrow focus sounds like an insult. What I'm saying is Santonio Holmes goes in to be the Central State wide receiver coach. And he says, I was a wide receiver. I was coached. These are the things that helped me. I can directly implement this to my wide receivers. But let's say Santonio Holmes goes and says, I want to be a head coach. What worked for your wide receivers ain't going to work for your quarterback, because it's not the same drill. Being able to watch over all of these different positions, you might have had 8 players in that wide receiver room. I think I might be being generous. You might have had 8 players in that wide receiver room. You got more than 8 positions to watch over. So this is the path to take. Now, I don't want to, I kind of derailed this a little bit more than I wanted to, but when it comes to Holmes, I like this a lot because I've seen a story that actually makes me think that Holmes might be ready for this. So Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers, he's had drop issues in the past. And his head coach, or excuse me, his wide receiver coach, Sanjay Lal, he was Holmes's former wide receiver coach. And in that time frame, he saw this drill that Holmes taught him. And this is from The Athletic. It says, over the next 2 weeks, talking about working with Johnston, over the next 2 weeks, Law brought a drill to the practice field. He first learned it more than a decade ago from receiver Santonio Holmes. Law was the New York Jets receiver coach, and Holmes was in his room. The drill honed the drill honed what Law calls a traffic catch technique. The coach throws the receiver the ball. The receiver focuses on squeezing the ball with 2 hands, then bringing it to his chest, locking it and pinning it without taking either hand off the football. So the actual drill itself isn't really that important, but it's the fact that if you trace back a decade, and whether you're saying it was Santonio Holmes doing it for himself, whether it was Santonio Holmes teaching it, regardless of what you're talking about, Santonio Holmes has this technique that was used over a decade later to teach a player how to catch the football. Do you think that Santonio Holmes has forgotten about this drill? Do you think that he's forgotten the traffic catch technique? I don't. So these little very specific traits that allowed him to succeed are things he can implement in a group that small. I just think it's a different conversation when you're talking about being a head coach. For Holmes, I love that this was, even though he wasn't present, even though he wasn't teaching it, these techniques, some people just need to know how to articulate. Some people just need to know, how do I phrase this technique? How do I explain this? Some people literally need the techniques. Some people are naturally gifted and they don't know what to teach you. Holmes is at the point where he knows what to teach you, at least with one drill, and I can assume it's others. He knows what to teach you. It's just about, can he get that through to a group of players who aren't him? So I think that this was pretty good. I'm excited. Tony Carter is the head coach. He's also an NFL guy. So you're looking at a couple of former NFL players who are joining the coaching ranks. And Holmes talking about how he's getting adjusted, but he does believe that he and Carter having success or having experience on the NFL level allows them to set high expectations. And I think that the assumption of success, the assumption of greatness often leads to the production of greatness. So take that how you want. I'm very excited about it. But you know what else I'm excited about? Jackson State softball going back to back. And they just did that in the softball championships. Let's break it down as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. You got this account, this account, this account, that account, that account, and you have a whole bunch of apps to try to track all of them. And honestly, your phone hates you for it. I'm just going to be honest with you. Your phone despises that you have so many apps, and I despise you too, because you could just have Monarch Money. It's simple. You know, no more looking at that account and this account and this account and that app and that app and that app. Just have one. Consolidate it into one app that's easier. You don't have as many places to go check, so you're not likely to forget. You just go ahead and go to monarchmoney.com or download the Monarch Money app, and it's right there at your fingertips. Everything you need, quick and easy, and it's a financial command center. So it's not just about saving a couple of dollars. It's about building wealth. It's about making sure that you're making smart financial investments and or decisions. So I don't care what app you're using right now. Delete it as I'm talking to you. Swipe up and have me in picture. Swipe out and have my voice in the background. Download Monarch Money right now. And if you use the code Locked On College, you get 50% off your first offer. Take control of your finances today. Use the code Locked On College for half off your first year at monarchmoney.com. That's Locked On College for 50% off your first year. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, for making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Jackson State goes back to back. And I think that that's the driving narrative within this conversation is that the softball team won the championship last year and they won it this year. And I think that the success from last year, when you're looking at what Coach Kevin Montgomery was saying, it heavily impacts the way that he views his team this year, and then impacts the way that he looked at the schedule. So I want to bring up these 2 quotes before getting to a couple of key stats in the closeout game. So Coach Montgomery says the East is just a dogfight, period, man. And we just trying to find a way through the season. Everybody gave us their best shot every game. Every game they gave us their best shot, and we just wanted to maintain. So you see right there the idea of I've seen what I've succeeded at. I know where I am. I'm a champion. We just want to maintain. There really is no ratcheting up as far as the SWAT goes. Maybe you want to talk about winning a game in a baseball tournament or softball tournament, but as far as the SWAT goes, there is no ratcheting up. It's just I want to maintain. So I thought that was an interesting look at it. While everybody gave us their best shot, there are so many people who say, oh, we get everybody's best shot. And a lot of times it feels like a cop-out. You don't normally hear this sentiment after a championship game, but you did today. You did today. After they won this title, they said the East is a dogfight, and we're just trying to make it or find a way through the season. Now, here's the other thing, the mental fortitude, because every championship team has a different makeup, but when you're able to roll over some players, when you're able to keep coaches, when you're able to just build what it's like to win. The season after winning a championship, everybody knows what to do. Even if you weren't there, you fall in line. The season after you win a championship, everybody is sitting there saying, this coach has the blueprint, or we were just a part of the blueprint. So I know what it takes. Let's follow. Winning makes people listen. Success makes people follow. Yes, you can be a great leader and be bad, and then you're able to lead your team to success. You have to do that. But once you are able to check that box, then people want to follow you. Then people want to listen to you. Then people just buy in naturally. Think about it. Think about it. A lot of people hated the Patriot way. I use this all the time. Matt Patricia was never going to work taking the Patriot way to Detroit. You're not Belichick. But when the Patriots win Super Bowls, people go to New England and they knew you got to get with this Patriot way because this is how they succeed. It's a culture, and it's something that you may not like, but you're going to buy into. And I think that having that championship culture from last season helps. But this is something that Montgomery mentioned. He said, I think the experience from last year's turmoil and everything else we went through last year, it just helped us stay together more and more this year. So we're just happy to be here. We wanted to get this back to back, and they did. They were able to check that off. I gave my spiel this time before, so I don't need to really elaborate on that quote. But here are a couple of key stats. So, or key moments, I should say. One's a moment, one's a stat. Both are very pivotal to the Jackson State Championship game against Florida A&M. So you're looking at Ariana Murillo, who she didn't go at the bat often, only twice. And she got one hit, but that one hit was major because it drove in two. So when she went up to bat in the second inning, I believe, yeah, it was in the second inning, it was 1-0. Jackson State was down 1-0. So you're looking at Murillo, who enters the game. She's at bat, boom, just hits a single, but she has has a 2-run RBI afterwards. So that was her lone hit. She went up to bat one other time. She didn't connect in, but you're looking at Murillo, who had the pivotal moment. That was the moment in which Jackson State took the lead, and they never gave it up from there. It was 1-0 at that time. Then it became 2-1. Jackson State added another run at some point to make it 3-1. But that 2-1 lead, that was all you actually ended up needing. And it's not like football or basketball, and it's like, oh, well, we would have played the game different if we were down one. No, you was trying to get runs on the board, and you just couldn't. And a key part of that was Brooklyn Morris, because when she was in the game, FAMU was limited to just 1 of 5 when you're talking about having scorers or runners in scoring position. So that one was obviously that first run in the beginning of the game in the first inning. But from there, you have 4 more opportunities. And oftentimes, FAMU left the inning with players on base. And that is because of what Morris was able to do. Morris ended up being the MVP of the tournament, obviously, pitcher, winning team. It makes sense. But when you look at it, look, you're going to get some hits. You're going to get some people who are on base. But when it's time to lock in, when it's time to go from sitting back, relaxing to leaning up in the chair, and now it's time to get this action going, that's when Brooklyn Morris really turned it on. And we could tell by the 1 of 5 that FAMU had when they had runners in scoring position. Back to back, they're going to be facing Alabama. Howard, I mentioned yesterday, they're going to be facing Duke. So those are the games that we're going to be seeing in the regionals. You're going to have Jackson State versus Alabama, and then also Howard versus Duke. On tomorrow's episode, we're going to be talking about those hated rivals, Prairie View A&M, who honestly, I got to give them some love, applaud, because the way that they're approaching recruiting, chef kiss. I got to give it up to Tremaine Jackson. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.